Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Fiercely Spiritual podcast. I'm Sandra Ray, and I'm so delighted you're here today. I am talking about a subject that it's something that we always hear about. It's the topic of spiritual expansion, spiritual growth, but if it's a side of it that we don't always hear about. So we're going to talk about how to master spiritual expansion and particularly how to master dealing with what I call spiritual growing pains. Because when we talk about spiritual growth, we rarely talk about the growing pains associated with it. Now, it's not to say that you have to have growing pains. It's not to say that everyone will experience this in this particular way. But what I find for most people is that it is something that happens. And unless you know what it is, you're going to mistake it for something else. So first of all, let's look at what are spiritual growing pains. Well, when you think about it, when you think about what growing pains are, if a child has a growth spurt, they may experience growing pains, they may experience aches and pains in their limbs or their joints, and it's just a sign of that growth spurt, and it passes over a number of days or weeks usually. So it's the same with spiritual growing pains. It's when, if you can imagine, you're living inside a bubble, and this is your comfort zone. This bubble that is all around you is your zone of comfort, and that's where you usually reside. You rarely go outside of this bubble. And when you do spiritual work, you begin to expand, and it's a little bit like your bubble no longer fits you. Do you ever see those crabs, hermit crabs, I think they're called, where they grow out of their shells and they have to leave their protective shell and go find a bigger shell because their shell is becoming too small. They've been growing and it doesn't fit them anymore. So it's a little bit like that. When you expand beyond your bubble, when you leave that protective shell of your comfort zone, it's like that crab. It's so vulnerable because it doesn't have that shell, and that feels uncomfortable. You feel vulnerable, you feel uncomfortable, everything feels like it's different, it's not what you're used to. And then eventually, of course, the crab finds a bigger shell and gets straight into it, and then life is as usual. It's just expanded beyond its shell and found a bigger, more comfortable one. And the same with spiritual growth. You expand in stages. You can have constant expansion, but usually you will experience probably a spurt of spiritual growth at certain points in your life. It could happen on a regular basis. It might only happen a few times in your life. But when you experience those growth spurts, when you experience that expansion, you're going to want to know what that is and how to deal with it. So how do you overcome it? And I suppose overcome is probably not the right word. How do you deal with it? How do you accept it? I'm going to go through all that with you now. So the first thing to do is to recognize that it's there, to recognize that there are periods of discomfort where you're growing, where you're expanding, where you feel vulnerable, and this is going to feel uncomfortable. And once you recognize that this is happening, you can accept it a little bit better. If you don't know if it's happening, you're like, what is going on in my life? Everything seems chaotic. It seems unknown. It seems like things are changing and I don't know why. And that's just going to lead to more confusion. It's going to lead to more uncomfort or discomfort and more feelings of vulnerability. So first of all, recognize that it's happening. Know that this happens. Secondly, when you are in that space, when it is happening, know why it is happening. So if you live in a certain town or a city and you've lived there your whole life, or a country even, and you may never have left that place, you may never have gone to visit someplace new, and then suddenly you decide to travel the world and you go to a new country or a new city or someplace that you've never been before, And you may experience a culture shock because it is so different to what you know. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad, it's just different. And that's natural because when we're used to something, when we're used to living in a certain way and being a certain way, when suddenly you go and start exploring the world, expanding your horizons, of course that's a good thing. But it can sometimes be a culture shock, and you might experience places that don't feel comfortable, they don't feel like home, and you may experience other places that are so welcoming and feel better than the place you live. They feel more welcoming, more comfortable, more like home than the place even that you live. So it's only by exploring and by going and visiting these places that you get to know what feels good or what doesn't feel good. And it's not saying any one place again is good or bad, it's just knowing that they're different, and that's fine, and knowing that you have preferences, and experiencing your preferences is a good thing, because if you don't visit those places then you can't know what you like or what you don't like. So when you grow spiritually, you get to experience that. It's a little bit like that culture shock where you start expanding. And usually with the culture shock, if you experience that in a place that you visit, it lasts for maybe a few days or it could be a few weeks. But usually if you spend a longer period there, then things begin to seem more natural. You get used to it and you get to know the reasons why the place is like that. You get to experience new things. And the same with spiritual growth. You're going to feel that sense of discomfort. You're going to feel that sense of unknowingness. And then you'll start to realize, okay, actually, this isn't so bad. This is something that I hadn't experienced before, but I'm willing to go there. I'm willing to discover. I'm willing to explore. And I'm willing to see how it feels. So knowing why you are expanding, why do you expand? Why do you grow? Because it doesn't feel good to stay stuck. It doesn't feel good to stay in one place and never expand your horizons. We are expansive, infinite spirit, and we can't survive without expanding, without constantly changing and expanding. So it is as natural as the sun rising and setting each day that you will experience change and growth. And even if it feels that you're not experiencing it, you are always experiencing it on some level, even if it is imperceptible. And often the reason why people feel stuck, the reason why we feel that things aren't changing, is because we're not willing to expand beyond that comfort zone. We're staying in that comfort zone, and that's what makes us feel stuck. That's what makes life seem like it's on repeat and it's the same thing every day, because we're not willing to feel the growing pains. And they're temporary growing pains, those spiritual growing pains. They're never lasting, they're never long term. It's just a temporary adjustment, and then it becomes the new normal. Then it becomes natural, and then you stay in that space for a while until you expand again to the next level. So knowing the why, you want to expand, you want to grow, you want to experience new things. And when you realize that, then you can accept, okay, well, there might be slight periods of discomfort, but that's okay, because I know that this too shall pass. And then accepting, the third stage is to accept what's happening and accept it as a good thing rather than seeing it as something unwanted. And this is something that I find sometimes I struggle with when things start to feel a little bit uncomfortable, when things start to feel unusual, or when my whole world just seems to be changing and I'm like, what is going on? It's like at first I'll resist it because I'm like, I don't want, to experience this. It doesn't feel good. And then I'll realize, okay, this is something that I'm growing into. This is something that I want to experience. I'm doing all of this spiritual work because I want to experience the growth and the newness and to expand beyond my comfort zone. And to do that, I'm going to have to feel that slight discomfort or that unknowingness or the vulnerability. And that's okay, and just allow it. And it does take practice. It's not necessarily something you're going to do in one day. You might, but generally it takes practice to be in that space of allowing, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. And then fourth is to know that you are always safe and that all is well, that even if it seems that your world is breaking down, usually that's when the breakthrough is happening. It's usually when things seem like they're breaking down and everything is just crumbling down around you. That's when the walls, the boundaries of your comfort zone are crumbling down and you're expanding. So know that you're always safe and all is well, and that you are forever held in divine magic, in the magic of the universe. You're forever held in that love. So just knowing that is such a comfort. So ultimately, your expansion, your growth is a good thing, and we need it to be able to live in the way that you want to live. Your soul wants to experience that expansion. Your soul wants to experience that freedom. You don't want to be confined within a bubble, because when you think about it, what is that bubble that you're confining yourself to? It's like a little mini prison that you put yourself in, and you certainly don't want that. And if you resist it, if you resist the expansion, if you resist the growth, and if you're going to grow anyway, you're always growing. So you can be pulled along kicking and screaming, or you can choose to go with it. You can choose to flow with it, and you can choose to be in that state of acceptance. Otherwise, the growing pains are going to last longer. If you resist it, they're going to be more difficult. They're going to be more severe. But if you accept things, then the slight discomfort actually lasts less and less time, because you're just flowing with it. You're accepting it. It's the resistance that makes the growing pains or the discomfort persist. So the less you resist, the quicker you flow through it, and the more expansion you're going to feel. And ultimately, when you do feel that expansion, when you do expand beyond your comfort zone, you're going to have that feeling of like, oh, this is amazing. This is where I wanted to be. This is where I was afraid to go. And now that you're there, you're going to think, yeah, this feels good. And then you're going to want to do it again. And you might experience a bit of discomfort again the next time. And you might experience it the time after that and the time after that. But you're going to know what lies beyond. And often when we've tasted what lies beyond, we can accept slight periods of discomfort or slight periods of growth, because we know what lies on the other side. It's like the labor pains when you're in labor and you're going through the discomfort, but you know what lies at the end of it, this wonderful gift that lies at the end of it. And that's why you do it, because there's something so rewarding, something amazing that's coming out of it. So I hope you got something out of this, and that you are able to flow with your spiritual expansion. You're able to accept those spiritual growing pains and to know that they exist, first of all, and to flow with them a little bit easier and to feel a little bit better. So I am so delighted to talk to you again this week, and I'm looking forward to the podcast episode next week. And enjoy the rest of your week.